She handed me an ultimatum at 7 in the morning, standing in our kitchen in Greensboro, North Carolina, like she was reading me a weather report. Not a conversation. Not a question. A declaration. My ex is coming to my birthday party on Saturday. Be cool about it, or we're done. I was still holding my coffee. Still half asleep. Still wearing the same work shirt I'd been wearing since Tuesday because I had a mulching job in Burlington and the truck broke down on I-40 and I hadn't slept more than 5 hours in 3 days. And Melanie was standing there in her silk robe with her arms crossed, looking at me like she was waiting to see if I was going to be difficult. I set down the mug. I looked at her, and I said, "I'll be very cool." She smiled. She actually smiled, like she'd won something. She had no idea what she'd just given me permission to do. My name is Travis Calloway. I'm 41 years old. I run a landscaping company called Calloway Green out of Greensboro, and I have been building it from nothing for 11 years. Before that, I was a groundskeeper at a golf course out in High Point. And before that, I was a kid from Burlington who never had 2 dimes to rub together and figured out early that dirt and sweat were the only things between me and the life I wanted. I am not a dramatic man. I don't enjoy confrontation. I'm the kind of guy who shows up early, stays late, and doesn't say much unless he has something worth saying. My employees will tell you I'm fair. My clients will tell you I'm reliable. My neighbors will tell you I wave when I drive by. But what happened at Melanie's birthday party last Saturday? In our house, in front of her friends, her sister, her coworkers, and the man she had the nerve to invite. That was the most deliberate, calculated, quietly devastating thing I have ever done. And I want to tell you every single detail of how I got there. Because this story didn't start with an ultimatum on a Tuesday morning. It started 3 years ago, and the ending she never saw coming had been building the entire time. Before we get into it, if this is the kind of story you came here for, hit subscribe. Leave a comment below and tell me, have you ever been pushed to the point where the calmest thing you could do was also the most devastating? Because I want to hear it. And hit the like button, because what I'm about to tell you is something I've never told anyone outside of my brother and my attorney. I met Melanie Donahue 8 years ago at a fundraiser for Guilford County Schools. She was a marketing coordinator for a mid-size healthcare company downtown. Pretty, sharp, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and make people feel like they'd been waiting for her without even knowing it. I was there because one of my commercial clients had bought a table and invited me along, and I spent most of the night standing near the bar feeling underdressed. She came over and asked if I was having a terrible time. I told her only a moderate amount of a terrible time. She laughed. That was it. We dated for 2 years before I proposed. We got married at a venue out on Lake McIntosh, outdoor ceremony, late October. The maples were turning. Her father walked her down the aisle and shook my hand afterward and said, "You take care of her." Not a question. I said, "Yes, sir," and I meant it. For the first 4 years, things were good. Not perfect. We had our friction, the way any 2 people with separate lives and shared space always do. She wanted to move to a bigger house in Fisher Park. I thought we should wait until the business was more stable. She thought I worked too much. I thought she spent too freely. Nothing catastrophic. Just the normal negotiation of 2 lives running alongside each other. Then Melanie was promoted to Director of Marketing. New title, new salary, new schedule, new confidence. And with that new confidence came something else, a reconnection with the part of her life that existed before me. The ex's name is Donovan Marsh. Let me tell you what I know about Donovan Marsh. He's 44. He grew up in Charlotte. He works in commercial real estate, which in his case means he talks about deals a lot and actually closes them sometimes. He drives a black Range Rover. He wears cologne that costs more than I make in a Saturday. He has the kind of jawline and smile combination that makes women say he's charming and makes other men say he's full of himself, and both. Groups are probably right. He and Melanie dated for 3 years before she met me. She had told me the basics early in our relationship. That it ended because he wasn't ready to settle down, that they'd stayed in loose touch through mutual friends. She described it as over and done and not worth much conversation. For 4 years, I had no reason to think about Donovan Marsh at all. Then Melanie's company hosted a regional conference in Charlotte, and she came home 2 days later in a way I hadn't seen before. Lighter, somehow. Talking faster. Mentioning a dinner she'd gone to with colleagues where she'd run into some old friends. She didn't say his name. She didn't have to. I wasn't suspicious exactly. I was just paying attention. And when you pay attention, you start noticing things. The way her phone screen was suddenly always face down. The way she'd step outside to take certain calls. The way when I asked casually who she'd been texting, she'd say, "Just Brittany from work," without quite looking at me. I'm not a man who tears through his wife's phone or hires a private investigator. That's not who I am, but I am a man who pays attention to patterns. And the patterns were telling me something. 3 months after the Charlotte conference, Donovan came to Greensboro. He had a client meeting at a development site out near the airport. Melanie mentioned it so casually over dinner. "Oh, Donovan's going to be in town this week, we might grab coffee," that it was clearly designed to sound like nothing. I nodded. I said that's fine. She came home that evening in that same strange lightness, and I decided right then that I needed to be honest with myself about what I was watching. What I was watching was a woman who was starting to look back. I've thought a lot about why people look back, and I think it has very little to do with the person they're looking at. Donovan could have been anyone. He could have been a bartender she met at a bachelorette party, or a guy from high school who friended her on Facebook. The looking back isn't about the specific destination. It's about the feeling that your current life has walls, that something essential got left behind somewhere, that there's a version of yourself out there still waiting to be claimed. I understood that feeling. I'd had it myself. Years back, when I was still grinding at the golf course in High Point and watching my old college roommate buy a house while I was still renting a 2-bedroom apartment near UNCG, I used to drive sometimes with no particular direction, just letting the truck find its way down roads I hadn't been down before, like I was looking for something I'd missed the first time through. What I found eventually was that the looking back only stops when you decide to be fully present in the life you've actually built. Some people make that decision, some people don't. The difference, I've come to believe, is not about the life, it's about the person. Not necessarily leaving, not necessarily doing anything wrong, but looking back. The way people do when they start feeling restless in the life they have and the life they left starts to glow in their memory. I didn't blow up. I didn't make ultimatums. I did what I've always done when I face a hard situation in business or in life. I got very quiet. I paid very close attention. And I started making decisions with the end in mind. The end I had in mind was not the one she was steering toward. Over the next 6 months, I had 3 conversations with Melanie about how I was feeling. Not fights, conversations. I told her that I felt like she was pulling away, that something had shifted and I didn't know how to reach her. Each time, she reassured me. She said I was overthinking. She said she was just busy with the new role. She said we were fine. She kept saying we were fine. And every time she said it, she made less eye contact than the time before. The last conversation was in November. We'd gone to dinner at Crafted downtown on Elm Street, a place we used to go every anniversary. I had told her that I needed us to talk, really talk, about where we were headed. She had her second glass of wine before I finished the sentence. And then she said something that I have turned over in my mind 100 times since. She said, "Travis, I love you, but sometimes I feel like I married the safe choice." I didn't respond right away. I looked at the table. I looked at my hands. I thought. About 11 years of working before sunrise in the summer heat of Greensboro, because I was building something I was proud of and wanted to share with someone I loved. I thought about the house we bought together, the vacations we took, the way I sat with her through her mother's surgery for 4 days without leaving the hospital. I thought about what it meant to be someone's safe choice. Then I said, "That's good information." And I signaled the waiter for the check. She tried to walk it back. She said she didn't mean it like that, but we both knew she did. That was November. Her birthday is in March. The birthday where she informed me at 7 in the morning over coffee that Donovan Marsh was going to be in attendance, and I was expected to behave myself. Between November and March, I had been doing some quiet reconstruction of my own life. I called my brother Owen, who lives over in Durham and runs a financial planning practice. I told him the truth about where things stood. He listened without interrupting, which Owen never does unless something serious is going on. And then he said, "How long have you been waiting to have this conversation?" I said I wasn't sure. He said, "Get your paperwork in order. Not because you've decided anything, because a man who knows his own numbers has options." I did what Owen said. I met with an attorney named Sandra Pierce, a family law attorney with an office on North Elm Street. I didn't file anything. I wasn't ready for that. I just wanted to know where I stood. What was mine? What was shared? What a split would look like if it came to that. She walked me through it clearly. She was calm and specific and made me feel like I was handling a business problem, which was exactly what I needed. I left her office feeling not lighter exactly, but grounded, like I could see the whole board. I also quietly rerouted several of my business accounts and spoke to my accountant, Ray, about structuring Callaway Green in a way that clarified what was personal and what was business. Nothing deceptive, nothing hidden. Just clean. Clear lines that had been blurry for years because I'd been operating on trust without documentation, which is the kind of thing you do when you're certain your life is permanent, and stop doing when you're not. And I started making changes in my daily life that were so small Melanie probably didn't even register them, but that together added up to a man who was quietly, incrementally, becoming someone who didn't need her approval to feel okay about himself. I started running again. Every morning at 6, around the Latham Park Loop. I started calling Owen once a week. I had dinner with my old crew from the golf course days, guys I'd let drift away over the years because Melanie always found them rough around the edges. I started reading again, something I hadn't done regularly in years, just sitting in the backyard on a Sunday morning with a book and a cup of coffee, not filling the space with noise. Some of those changes were practical. Some of them were just about remembering who I was before I'd spent years quietly reshaping myself around someone else's preferences. You don't notice it happening in real time. You make small adjustments, one at a time. You stop calling that friend because she doesn't like him. You stop spending Sunday mornings the way you used to because she prefers brunch. You stop talking about your business struggles because the conversation always seems to land on how stressed it makes her. Each adjustment is small. Together, they add up to a version of yourself you barely recognize. One morning in February, I was running the Latham Park Loop, and I passed the pond at the south end of the trail where I used to fish as a kid when my uncle lived nearby. And I felt something open up in my chest, like a window had been unlocked that I hadn't even noticed was closed. I kept running. I thought about the kid who used to fish in that pond. I thought about the man I'd become. I thought about whether that man would recognize himself if he looked hard enough. I was not plotting revenge. I want to be precise about that. I was becoming the version of myself that had existed before I spent years trying to be who Melanie needed me to be. And then, the birthday came. The party was set for Saturday afternoon. Melanie had rented out the back of a wine bar on Spring Garden Street called the Vine Room. About 30 people, her co-workers, her girlfriends, her sister Kayla and Kayla's husband, a couple she and I had been friends with for years named Phil and Andrea. Nice group. I knew most of them. I liked most of them. I had been involved in the planning because that's who I am. I'd paid for the venue deposit. I'd arranged for the cake from Maxie B's Bakery on Walker Avenue, Melanie's favorite. I'd coordinated the floral arrangement with a friend who runs a shop on Battleground Avenue. I'd done all the things a husband does when his wife has a birthday. The morning of the party, I got up early. I made breakfast, eggs and toast and fruit the way Melanie likes it. I left it on the counter with a card I'd written by hand. Then I went out to run. When I got back, she was in the kitchen in her robe reading the card. She looked up and said thank you, genuinely, and for just a moment she looked like herself before everything changed. I nodded. I went to shower. At 2 in the afternoon, we drove over to the Vine Room together. I helped carry things in. I talked to Phil and Andrea when they arrived. I got Melanie's sister a glass of champagne. I was, in every measurable way, a perfectly attentive husband. Donovan arrived at 4. I saw Melanie's face change from across the room. Lit up. Not the way a face lights up when an old friend walks in. The way a face lights up when someone you've been waiting for finally appears. He was what you'd expect. Tall, well-dressed, that smile. He came in, and the room shifted slightly around him the way rooms do around people who are accustomed to being the center of attention. He hugged Melanie for a beat too long. He said something in her ear that made her laugh and touch his arm. I watched all of this from where I was standing near the bar. Phil came and stood next to me. He looked at Donovan, then at me, then back at Donovan. He said, "You doing okay?" I said, "Absolutely." He nodded slowly. He's known me long enough to know what that means. What followed next was about 45 minutes of the most quietly mortifying thing I have experienced in a marriage. Donovan moved through the room like he already knew everyone, because the truth was, Melanie had probably been talking about him enough that some of them already felt like they did. He found my wife in every conversation. He refilled her glass. He touched the small of her back when he leaned in to look at her phone as she showed him something. Nobody acknowledged me. Not deliberately, not cruelly, just, they'd all been arranged around the sun of this man's arrival, and I was standing in a different orbit. I watched. I stayed calm. I talked to Andrea. I talked to Melanie's co-worker, Denise, who told me I had to try the brie, and I said I would. I smiled when I was supposed to smile. I refilled my own glass. And then, at around 4:45, Donovan walked toward the entrance to take a phone call. And I set down my glass, straightened my jacket, and followed him out. He was standing just outside the door on Spring Garden Street, facing the parking lot, phone to his ear. He saw me come out and held up a finger. 1 second. I nodded. I waited. He finished his call. He turned to me. He extended his hand. "You must be Travis," he said. Big smile. Confident handshake. The handshake of a man who had been told something about me and wasn't worried about it. I shook his hand. Firm. Steady. I looked him in the eye, and I said the thing I had been building toward for months. "Donovan, good to finally meet you. Listen, I want to say something and I want to mean it." I kept my voice even and quiet, the way you talk when you want someone to actually hear you. "She's all yours, man. I was just leaving." He stared at me. I said, "Take good care of her." Then I walked back inside, picked up my jacket from the stool where I'd left it, said goodbye to Phil and Andrea, told Melanie's sister Kayla it was a great party, and to tell the birthday girl I said happy birthday, and walked out through the front door of the Vine Room onto Spring Garden Street. I sat in my truck for a moment. Somewhere behind me, I could already feel the moment when Donovan walked back in and said something to Melanie, or maybe said nothing and just looked at her a certain way, and she scanned the room and didn't find me. I thought about what Donovan's face had looked like when I said it. He hadn't expected it. That was the thing about men like Donovan. They are accustomed to being the threat that husbands have to manage. They walk into a room expecting to encounter nervousness or false warmth or barely contained hostility. What they are not prepared for is a man who looks them in the eye and hands them exactly what they came for, with complete composure, and then leaves. He'd wanted to be the exciting option, the road not taken, the proof that there was something better out there. I made him the responsibility. I started the truck. I drove home. I want to tell you what happened next, but first I want to tell you why I did it the way I did. Because I had 300 different ways to end that marriage. I could have made a scene. I could have pulled Melanie aside and told her everything I'd been feeling since November. I could have filed papers in February and handed them to her at the party like some kind of dramatic gesture. I could have confronted Donovan. I could have called Kayla and told her what was going on. I could have done a dozen things that would have been louder and messier and would have made people feel like they'd witnessed something. But what I understand about dignity is this: it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't require the other person to crumble in front of everyone for you to feel like you won. Real dignity is the quiet decision to stop participating in something that's beneath you. Melanie had handed me an ultimatum because she wanted me to be present and compliant and small at a party designed to showcase someone else. And I had showed up. I had done everything right. And then I had walked out on my own terms, calmly, graciously, in a way that left her with absolutely nothing to argue against. She couldn't call me a scene maker. She couldn't call me irrational. She couldn't tell people I'd humiliated her. All she could say was that I left. And the only thing that explained why I left was the situation she had created. I was home by 5:30. I poured myself a bourbon. I sat in the backyard and looked at the garden I'd put in last fall. Ornamental grasses along the fence line, black-eyed Susans near the back corner, a Japanese maple I'd pruned myself that was just starting to show new growth. I thought about the fact that I had planted all of it, knowing I might not be the one who stayed here to watch it grow. That thought hurt. I'm not going to tell you it didn't, but there's a difference between something hurting and something being wrong. Melanie called at 6:14. I let it ring. She called again at 6:20. I let it ring. At 6:42, she sent a text that said, "Where are you? What happened? Please call me." I didn't respond. She came home at 8:30. The party had ended early, according to what I pieced together afterward from Andrea, who called me the next morning because she's good people and she was worried about me. Melanie had spent the last hour of the party not really present. Donovan had left relatively soon after I did, and the energy of the room had collapsed in a way nobody could quite explain or recover from. Melanie walked in the back door and found me sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of water and my phone face down in front of me. She looked like she'd been crying in the car. She said, "Why did you leave?" I said, "I told you I'd be cool. I was very cool." She said, "Travis, that's not what I meant." I said, "I know what you meant. I want to make sure you know what I meant." What followed was a 2-hour conversation that I am not going to reproduce in full, but I will tell you the shape of it. She cried. She said she hadn't done anything wrong. I said I agreed with her. She hadn't done anything I could point to and call wrong. I said what I could point to was a marriage that had been declining for 18 months while I tried to address it, and she reassured me everything was fine, and a birthday party where she'd invited her ex-boyfriend and told me to behave myself, and that taken together, these things told me something I needed to listen to. She asked if I was ending our marriage over a birthday party. I said, no, I'm ending it over November. Over 3 conversations where I told you I was losing you and you told me I was imagining things. I'm ending it because you told me I was the safe choice, and you didn't take it back when you had the chance. I'm ending it because we both already know where this is going, and I'd rather leave with my self-respect than stay until you make it official. She said Donovan wasn't what she was looking for. She said she didn't know what she was looking for. She said she needed time to figure that out. I said I understood that. I said I genuinely hoped she found it. She said, I don't want a divorce. I looked at her for a long moment, and I said, I know you don't, but I do. I moved out 3 weeks later. I'm staying with Owen in Durham temporarily while some things are sorted out. Sandra Pierce has been thorough and fair, and I have nothing but respect for the way she's handled this. The business is mine, structured cleanly, documented clearly, the way it should have been years ago. The house will need to be sorted, but we're both being adults about it, which is more than I expected and something I'm grateful for. Donovan, for what it's worth, is apparently no longer in the picture. Melanie's sister Kayla called me 2 weeks after the party. She got my number from Andrea, and she said she wanted me to know she thought I'd handled everything with more class than anyone in that situation deserved. She said Donovan had called Melanie twice after the party, and then stopped, which is what men like Donovan do when the complication becomes real. She said her sister was a mess. I told Kayla I was sorry to hear that. I meant it. I was genuinely sorry for Melanie's pain. Ending a marriage is not a victory. There is nothing fun about standing in your own kitchen telling the woman you married that you want a divorce. I don't recommend it. I don't celebrate it. But I will tell you this. The morning after that conversation, I woke up early. I made coffee. I sat on the back steps of Owen's house in Durham, and the sun was coming up over the tree line, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happy exactly. Not relief exactly. Just present. Like I was fully in my own life again for the first time in years. I thought about the morning 3 months earlier when Melanie handed me the ultimatum over coffee and waited to see if I was going to be difficult. I thought about how she smiled when I said I'd be cool, like she'd won something. She'd won a party with her ex in it. A party where I showed up, did everything right, and left on my own terms. A party that ended the moment I walked out, not because I made a scene, but because the one person holding the whole thing together had quietly decided he was done. I was very cool. I kept my word. People ask me sometimes what I would have done differently, and the honest answer is, I don't know that I'd change much. I stayed too long, maybe. I had those 3 conversations instead of 1, trying to give something a chance that had already stopped trying. But I'm not angry about it. You owe something to a marriage you meant when you made it. I meant mine. I stayed until I was certain there was nothing left to stay for. My company is doing fine. We landed a contract with a commercial property management group in Greensboro last month that's going to keep my crew busy through the fall. I hired a new site manager named Brendan who's got good instincts and shows up when he says he will, which is all I've ever asked of anyone. I'm running in the mornings. I'm sleeping the way a man is supposed to sleep. Some mornings I drive through Greensboro on my way to a job site, down Elm Street past Crafted, where Melanie and I had that dinner in November, out along Battleground Avenue past the flower shop where I ordered her birthday arrangement, up through the neighborhoods where my crews are working, and I feel the city differently than I used to. Not heavier, not sadder, just more honestly. Like I'm seeing it without the filter of a relationship that had stopped being honest a long time ago. I talk to Owen twice a week now. He keeps asking when I'm going to move back to Greensboro permanently and stop being a house guest. I tell him when I find a place that feels right. He says I'm being picky. I say that after everything, I've earned the right to be picky. He can't argue with that. I've thought about what I would tell a younger version of myself, the version who was standing at that fundraiser in Guilford County watching a pretty woman cross the room in his direction. I don't think I'd tell him not to go through with it. I don't believe in that kind of second guessing. Every experience I had in that marriage, the good years, the hard years, the slow decline, made me the person sitting here telling this story. I don't throw that away just because it ended. But I think I'd tell him this. Pay attention to how someone talks about the life they almost had. Pay attention to whether they're proud of what they chose, or whether they carry their choices like a weight around their neck. Because a person who's made peace with their own decisions is the only kind of person you can build something real with. Everyone else is just passing through on their way back to somewhere they left. There is a Japanese maple in the backyard of a house in Greensboro that I planted and pruned, and won't be there to watch grow. That still bothers me. Probably always will. Some things you lose and they stay lost. But most things, it turns out, travel with you. Dignity travels. Self-respect travels. The knowledge of who you are when someone tests it, that goes everywhere you go. I stood at the door of a wine bar on Spring Garden Street and shook a man's hand and told him she was all his. And in doing that, I took back something I hadn't even realized I'd been giving away for 2 years. Not to him, not to Melanie, just back to myself. That's the whole story. If it meant something to you, if you've been in that kitchen, or that party, or that conversation where someone tells you you're the safe choice and waits to see what you do, leave a comment. Tell me where you are in it. I read every one. Subscribe if you want to hear more. Like this video if it hits somewhere true. And remember, the coolest thing you can do sometimes isn't saying nothing. It's saying exactly the right thing, once, quietly, and then walking out. I'll see you next time. I'm going to be straight with you. Travis didn't win because he walked out. He won because he stopped waiting for her to choose him. And that's the part nobody talks about. We spend years being patient, being understanding, being the safe choice. Like that's something to be ashamed of. Reliable isn't boring, loyal isn't weak, and the moment you realize your worth isn't up for someone else to decide, that's when everything changes. Travis didn't leave that party in anger. He left with his dignity intact. And honestly, that's the hardest thing any of us will ever do. So if you're sitting somewhere right now feeling like the person you love is looking past you, hear me. You don't have to perform to be chosen. And if they can't see that, then like Travis said, she's all yours, man.